It is Friday, December 6, 2024. The time is 10:03. We're here for the Frederick County Public Schools Administration Building Student Conduct and Support Committee meeting. We have an agenda before us. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Have a motion to approve the agenda. I will second that motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have an agenda. Now I'll turn it over to Dr. Hummer.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. What we have for you this morning is to provide you an update of where we are with the new executive order, cell phone regulation policy that came out from the governor's office, as well as an updated guidelines. If you don't mind going to the next slide for me, please. Thank you, sir. As well as an update from the VDOE guidelines. As you all recall, we had moved forward with a cell phone regulation last year, which was fully implemented this year. And we are going to share with you some of the results of that new implementation, as well as how that has been going in the schools. We do have some representatives from our schools here. Thank you so much for being here. So they will be able to answer any specific questions that you have. And then we have some recommendations for you for next steps. We've had some conversations with the state. I've had some conversations with some other school divisions in regards to the next steps of what they are going to be doing in regards to this new cell phone executive order and VDOE guidelines that came down from the state. And then there is no action per se from this, Mr. Chair. However, we are recommending that this discussion happen at the full board meeting on Tuesday so that we can have a full understanding of the will of the board in regards to how you would like this implemented. So with that, I don't want to share too much information and steal the thunder of the team. So with that, I'm now going to hand it over to Mr. Boland and Mrs. Jordan. And then, of course, our school-based team will also be available to add information or be available for any questions. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll hand it over to the team. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Hummer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Funes, for joining us today. Today, we do want to provide you with some information, like as Dr. Hummer indicated, regarding the governor's executive order to the Virginia Department of Education and their recommendations. Today, we want to review the process that we used this past school year to come up with our new regulation. We want to review that regulation with you and with everyone, so we do have it fresh in our mind. We then want to discuss the governor's executive order and then the recommendations on next steps. So the current regulation went into effect on August 1st of this school year, of this calendar year. Prior to that, we went through a process where we collected input from stakeholders such as teachers, students, administrators, parents, and the board. Because on March 14th, we met with this committee and were provided with some direction from you all, which we appreciated. We utilized the information that we collected from the stakeholders and the board members to help guide the new regulation, and that was developed. And then that regulation went into effect on August 1st for this 24-25 school year. Where we landed on that regarding our unauthorized possession or use of portable communication devices was a little bit different depending on the level and the location. The regulation it states when students can and cannot use their portable communication devices that are theirs, personal devices. Where we landed on that, elementary schools, grades K through 5, middle schools, grades 6 through 12, students at NREP and students at the Dow J. Howard Center, that their portable communication devices will be silenced and put away during the school day. And any accessories used, portable accessories would be run through the school division's electronic device such as a Chromebook. That was, again, for grades K through 5. And really to wrap that up, it's pretty much phones are out, off, silent for the entire day. At the high school level, it was a little bit different. All portable communications were required to be silenced and put away during the school day. However, students at the high school level, at our 3 high schools, Jameswood High School, Millbrook, and Sharando, are permitted to utilize their portable communication devices briefly during the day. And the 2 real times are in transition during class changes and during their lunch period. There were some, some strict prohibitions that we came up with because there are certain areas where we absolutely cannot have portable communication devices being used. Those two places are obviously in restrooms and locker rooms. Students are able to use their communication devices on school buses after school, as long as that does not create any sort of safety hazard or distraction to the driver. And the extracurricular activities, that is also covered in the current regulation. Students are able to utilize their portable communication devices during extracurricular activities as permitted by their teacher, coach, group leader. And then we also had a few exceptions to the cell phone restrictions, specifically students with medical reasons and the need to have their cell phone and use it for with documented written permission from a medical provider. There are some students that may have within their IEP or their 504 plan special permissions to utilize a personal portable communication device for certain reasons. And then any student who's been given written authorization from the school's administrator. Those were the exceptions to those rules. Just to give you an idea then about how it's going. And I know that Ms. Jordan will kind of go into a little bit more of that in detail, but what we did want to do is provide you with just a little bit of data that we collected over to prepare for this and kind of talk about how many events, we say events, August through November. These are documented disciplinary infractions that students had for utilizing their portable communication device in an unauthorized way. In the 22-23 school year, for comparison, we got the numbers from August through November of the previous 2 school years and then utilized the numbers that we've collected this year, August through November, for comparison's sake. In the 22-23 school year, between August and November, there were 118 documented infractions for students utilizing their portable communication devices in school in an unauthorized manner. In the 23-24 school year, during that same period of time, it was 125 infractions of the regulation that were documented in a student's disciplinary record. This year, and we do believe directly related to the fact that we shared clear expectations with schools, staff, and families as we rolled this initiative out. This current school year, in the same time period, we've only seen 37 documented infractions. So that's a 70% decrease in the amount of documented infractions from last school year to this school year in that period of time between August and November. And the next slide we have for you is just, again, some comparison to kind of show you where we are. Again, in the 22-23 school year, we had over 100. Same with last year. And again, this year, we ended up with just 37 total infractions to this point in the school year. And we do believe that that's attributed to the fact that we communicated these expectations very clearly prior to the school year, and that the school administrators and the teachers are seeing a decrease in these events.
All right, so good morning, everyone. We're going to.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Can we just pause to see if there's any questions about that first
Yes.
portion, if we can, please? Mr. Chair, are there any questions with that first portion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the usage of the phones on the school buses. Having experience being a bus driver, communicating with the pupils while the bus is in motion or stopped is difficult enough. They're singing, yelling, and jumping around. If they're utilizing a phone, that compounds the situation to where the bus driver no longer has control over the children because they can't hear what he's saying. A bus is rather loud, traveling on the road, makes a lot of noise. I feel that the bus should be added to where the children are not allowed to use the phones unless there's emergency or they're categorized for a special need.
Currently, under our current regulation, as Mr. Boland reviewed, we do, if a cell phone does become a major distraction for the bus driver or in any way creates a safety concern, that student would be disciplined as a violation, and the bus driver would proceed as they would with any other disciplinary matter if a fight broke out or if there's foul language, whatever the case may be. Because as a bus driver, we felt it would be really difficult for them to enforce a strict prohibition. But if it does rise to a level where it is interfering with the bus driver's duty of maintaining a safe environment, then it would absolutely, the student would be disciplined. But that is something we can continue to look at, and as we'll discuss further down in the presentation, we're going to continue to monitor how things are being carried out and to determine whether or not any changes would need to be made to the regulation to your point exactly, to better ensure safety for our students and to remove the distraction cell phones can cause.
Okay, just to bring up an added aspect of it, being as there's only one bus driver and 30 some odd kids, they tend to become tribal, and if one is being pointed out doing something, the rest jump in there and try to show their independence by compounding a situation. So I feel that, well, depending on how the laws are maintained, not having them use the phones altogether, I think it's advantageous.
Yes, sir, and that's something we'll definitely keep a close eye on as we continue to monitor how things are going this school year.
One more aspect, the year 2023 was 290 incidents, 340 incidents. Was there a reason for the difference between the 2 years? And maybe that would give us some insight as to what the student population was looking to achieve by increasing the amount of incidents, to give us a heads up on the following years to avoid the same situation.
And I'm sorry if I missed this, Mr. Funes, but you're talking about the difference between the full years of the 2022 school year and the 2023 school year?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't believe we have that information, but it's definitely something we could look into to see if we can, based on the data we have, can determine what that difference was that created the rise in 2023, 2024.
And Mr. Chair, Mr. Funes, I think that's a great question, and this is why we have our school staff here, but if they want to chime in on this as well, I think this is a prime example as to why we needed a regulation. We were hearing from a lot of staff, we were hearing from administrators in regards to our students, as you mentioned earlier, they're very smart, but they sometimes can push the line, and we had an inconsistent regulation in place. So when we were able to firm up, as Mr. Boland just mentioned, the many different aspects of this regulation, it helped provide that structure, and it helped provide something for our staff to point to say, this is our regulation, and if you violate this, there are consequences. Whereas before, it was very loose, it was very convoluted, so now it's structured. So I think that's a prime example as to why we needed something in place. I would go on a limb and say that. I don't know if you all disagree with that, but that's what I would say. So, Mr. Funes, I think that's a great observation.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that goes to why we're seeing such a significant decrease this year. And it will be really interesting to look at the numbers once we complete this current school year to see the difference.
I'd like to ask a question. Do you involve the bus drivers to the point where you ask them their opinion?
Yes, ma'am.
And
And we will continue to ask them their opinion. It's across the board. Some of them share that it's not a concern. Some of them can share that it is a concern. Some of them are very appreciative of this new regulation so that they have more structure. So it is something that we continuously work with them. We're also going to be starting a bus conduct committee next semester, where we're going to be involving bus drivers, administrators, and other staff so that we can see if there are other structures we need to put on the bus. Because what we are seeing on the bus, as Mr. Funes just mentioned, you have one person with students that are to your back. That is a very, as Mr. Funes can share, that is very difficult. Our bus drivers are amazing, and our bus drivers are always looking at putting new structures in place. So we are working with them, and we will continue to monitor them and ask them their opinion. So yes, we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So for the next section, we're going to be discussing Governor Youngkin's Executive Order 33. This was issued by his office July 9th of this year, and the purpose of the executive order was to direct various government officials as well as departments to look into cell phone usage, student cell phone usage during the school day, and to provide guidance for local school divisions to create a cell phone-free education. And Mr. Bolin did highlight this previously, but just to highlight again, at this point in the year, we were really ahead of the game, because if you would remember when we met in March 14th, we had already issued multiple surveys to various stakeholders, including students, parents, staff, our administrators, about the student cell phone use in the school and where the concerns were and how we could look to our policy to revitalize it and to provide a more cell phone-free education environment to remove those distractions. And at this point, we had our regulation updated, and Dr. Hummer actually signed it July 15th. So when this was issued, we were already looking at this and ahead of it. But the final guidance wasn't released by the VDOE until September 17th. And if you could summarize the guidance into one sentence, it would be that the recommendation is to have a bell-to-bell restriction of cell phones during the entire school day at all levels. And we have provided, there are a couple of nuances and differences from elementary, middle, and high that was highlighted by the VDOE in their guidance. I won't read this to you, but it has been provided elementary, middle here, as well as high school. But even when they were talking about recommending exemptions, our policy or our regulation, as Mr. Bolin highlighted, we already had the exemptions to ensure that students in certain circumstances would still have access to their cell phone when they needed it, particularly in medical or disability situations. And so what we wanted to really highlight for you is where our current regulation differentiates from the VDOE guidance, and there is one primary difference. It is with our 3 high schools. The guidance by the VDOE does recommend that there be bell-to-bell restriction, that students don't have access to their cell phones during the entire day. Based on the feedback we received from our community, from parents, students, teachers, administrators, we did carve out a couple of exceptions, that being high school students could access their cell phones during class exchanges and during lunch period, because we recognize that a lot of, especially our upperclassmen in high school, they do have jobs, they help parents with younger siblings, with pickups, they've got a lot of stuff going on outside of school, and that would give them a time where they could check, but it would still protect our instructional time and the time that they were in class. Another thing that the VDOE did highlight is they wanted the cell phones to be off the person of the student. We don't have, our current regulation is not that clear, but it does clearly require that a cell phone be silenced and put away, meaning that if a student is even holding their device during instructional time, if they're looking at it, if it's making noise, that would be a violation of our current regulation, and they could be disciplined as such. And so when we received the final guidance from the VDOE, Mr. Bolin and I did meet to review it, and then we scheduled a time when we could meet with our high school principals to talk about the guidance, as well as to talk about where our schools were, how things were going this school year based on the new regulation that we had implemented for our cell phones. All in all, as you've already seen, we received a lot of positive feedback, a lot of positive response, because, well, just for some examples, the high school principals are noticing that kids are actually paying attention to board games provided to them during lunch. They notice when pieces are missing. So we've had students this year actually ask for, can you replace the pieces that are missing from, I forget the exact name of the game. We also have seen an increase in library circulation. This year, kids are checking out library books more than they have in the recent years. And so across the board, we are seeing a positive response to the changes we made in our regulation over the summer. We did not meet with middle and elementary principals simply because our current regulation does mirror that of the VDOE guidance. So we wanted to see, based on the differences that we had, we wanted to see where we were. And of course, I'm happy to give the floor to our high school representatives if they want to add anything or if you have any questions about what we're seeing in our schools.
I have a question. I see where the cell phone violations have gone down dramatically. In regards to other types of disciplinary action where a cell phone might have spurred something on, have we seen decreases in the other types of violations over this same time last year?
So I can answer that question, Mr. Chair. I think it's going to be hard to correlate the two. However, we are in the process of putting together that information because I am going to be reviewing that with you quarterly. And preliminarily looking at our data, it does look like we are down in regards to disciplinary infractions compared to this time last year in specific areas. Now, can we correlate the two? I think that might be a little bit more complicated, and I think that's hard to do that. But we are seeing a decline, and maybe that, then what I would like to say and go on a limb is, because we're putting these structures in place, the other piece to remember is, in addition to this new cell phone regulation, is we've rolled out the new code of conduct, which we've never had before. And again, I keep pointing to you guys, but please come up if you want to share. But what I've had with conversations with them and with other assistant principals is that has provided a lot more structure, because it is a lot more clear of what the expectations are. So I think that has also helped in regards to keeping those expectations. So I think that's probably a multitude, Mr. Chair. So, but I think to say specifically the cell phone, it might be hard, but I think it's a multitude of variables. I don't know if you all want to come up and share. Please, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning. To answer your question, we obviously don't have the data that correlates it, but I think we would all agree that the number of investigations that we have to complete on a daily basis has gone down based on our new cell phone policy. In the past, we've had to investigate a lot of situations, and a lot of them usually stem from social media and with the cell phones and who is saying what or what messages are being said to other students, and that has gone down significantly. So I do think that there is a correlation there, and I think we've seen definitely a decrease in that.
And just to speak more to that with investigations, the cell phones we use sometimes to take pictures in class, which is already a violation on another aspect, but that, and then also communicating to meet up in certain places for different reasons, to be out of class or to possibly set up for an altercation, and that has gone down as well.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great question.
Yes, that is a great question. And so now we're going to move into our recommendations. As you've heard from our high school representatives, as well as from the data presented, all in all, we have seen a massively positive response to the change we've already made to 219R, which is our cell phone regulation. And so at this point, our recommendation is not to change based on the VDOE guidance, because we are adhering to the purpose of it, which is to ensure removing the distraction from the instructional time and protecting that time for our students. We are seeing that, as well as additional positive impacts that we're already seeing. And so our recommendation is no changes. One, because also Mr. Boland and I agree, and he's definitely free to correct me if I'm overstating, but we agree that one of the reasons we've been so successful this year is because we were very intentional prior to the start of this year to be clear on our expectations, to make sure that students, parents, staff knew what the new regulation was, knew where the boundaries were, where they could and could not have cell phones. And because of that communication, and because there was already an expectation going to the new school year, I think that's one of the reasons we are seeing such a positive response. To change course and be more restrictive right after the holiday break and in the middle of the year, I think would lead more towards issues and not really the positive results we're looking for. But with that being said, as we've mentioned, Mr. Boland and I will continue to monitor the disciplinary sanctions that are occurring based on cell phones. We'll continue our conversations with the high schools to see what are going on in our schools. And once we've completed this school year, we'll take a hard look at the data that we have and then determine whether or not at that point in time we really should be more restrictive or whether we should alter our regulation based on what we're seeing in our schools. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has.
And Mr. Chair, if I can add 3 additional things to that. I think the question that you all should be asking is, if we keep this regulation the same, if that is the will of the board, what does that mean? Because the guidelines say bell to bell. And we asked that question specifically to the state, and these are exactly that. They are guidelines. And there are numerous guidelines that come out from the state that we follow to the T. And there are some guidelines that we determine what that means for Frederick County specifically. So in this particular example, there is no penalty. There is no punishment in regards to varying from this particular guideline. And I would say if you were to put this in a percentage, we are following this probably 98%. The biggest difference is going to be at the high school level during those 2 examples. And as I said, based on the feedback we've got from principals and from others, this is our recommendation. So that's that piece. The second one is, because this question always comes up, is what is the difference between a policy and a regulation? And I know we always get that question, which is a great question. And the biggest difference is the policy is what you all adopt, and the regulation is how I implement that policy. So the regulation does not need school board approval. However, I want to make sure that I'm implementing the spirit of your policy to make sure that we are aligned in regards to what you would like to see. So if you all said that you do not want this to continue and you want to change these 2 aspects of this regulation, then of course we would comply and move forward with that and roll with that. Thirdly, and I just want, this is more of an emphasis, is we are going to continuously review not only our code of conduct in regards to cell phone, but across the board. We've already met once with a committee this year to talk about the aspects of our code of conduct. We are going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to seek feedback from our principals. And if they notice that there is a shift or there is a change, and as Mr. Funes mentioned earlier, if we talk to all of our bus drivers and they say this is not working, then we will shift. And we could make that change and we can let you know. So this is not a one and done. This isn't just a here it is and then never hear it again. We will continue to monitor this because we have to establish those expectations for our students, and that is very, very important to us because that leads for good educational success. So just wanted to add those 3 things, Mr. Chair, before there's additional questions. And like I said, if we have any other questions, more than happy to answer them.
Well, I had advocated when I brought this policy forward. I was on board with the bell-to-bell, keeping them out of the schools from bell to bell. And of course, that was not how it eventually ended up. But I do see that what we currently have now is working. But I think if we were going to change it, I'd rather get school administrators' points of view as to, do they want to keep it the way it is? I have no problems with it staying this way, but they're the ones that have to enforce it, and they're the ones that are actually seeing it in practice. And I would think we should defer to what they think is best because they're overall running the show. So,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Servant. I very much appreciate your response because as an assistant principal who responds to these issues, I very much am in favor in keeping things the way that they are. I do believe that our policies and structures that we have in place are working. I took a look at some of our specific data to James Wood High School before I came here today, and we have less than 2% who have struggled at all with this policy, and only less than 1% have struggled, to have their phone out in school at all on more than 3 occasions. So it is working. I do feel that, continuing what we have with consistency for the rest of the school year would be easiest for us, and I believe that that would be good practice.
Good morning again. I appreciate you asking for our feedback as well. I agree. I don't think that we need to change the policy right now. We are seeing a decrease in our discipline numbers as they have demonstrated, and then also with what you had just asked about whether or not the cell phones are the crux of investigations or problems in the school, and we definitely have felt a decrease in that because we're not dealing with that situation. But I also think as high school students, they're young adults, and the fact that we have these expectations and structures in place are important for them to learn when it's appropriate and when it's not, because they're going to be going out into the job force or into college or other areas where they're not going to be able to have their phone, and so they're learning that restraint right now. And we are seeing that in a positive way. And I think, as Ms. Jordan had said earlier, with our young adults and our high school students, they do a lot of things outside of school. They do hold jobs, or they're working with community service, or they are helping with families and things. So by allowing them to have the ability to check messages from families or with jobs in between class changes or at lunch, I do think that that's a positive piece, and it's teachers can also say, hey, if a student wanted to do something in class, they said just 20 minutes more and you can check it in the hall if they get an important message or something like that. And so I think it's an important life skill that they're learning, that balance of when it's appropriate and when it's not to check the phone.
Again, thank you guys for soliciting our feedback. Greatly appreciated. I'm not going to belabor because I'm just going to echo everything that they just said because I agree with all of it 100%. Our data supports it. Again, that personal accountability, responsibility. When you talk with our local employers, I think it mirrors where they're heading into. And I think teaching that responsibility at that level is super important. So echo everything they said. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I may add just for information, I speak with my counterparts at other divisions quite often, and I know that there are other divisions who have, well, Prince William in particular, they just adopted their updated cell phone regulation that mirrors the VDOE guidance, but it's not going into effect until August of next year. And then I know there are other divisions throughout the Commonwealth who give students access, just like we do during the day, primarily during lunch, and they're going to maintain that as well at this point. So I just give that as information.
Thank you. Is that?
I for myself was an advocate for bell-to-bell. I felt that when you're trying to teach young adults how to control themselves, you have to restrict them and then give them a little leeway instead of giving them a leeway before you hypothetically would do the bell-to-bell. I hear how it has improved the schoolwork and discipline, so I tend to change my mind about the bell-to-bell. But when I was a kid, we didn't have the phones, and we managed quite well. And I was encouraged by the fact that you said that they're using the library. That's a big plus. That's all I have to say.
No.
Are we winding this down?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that the younger students need to have it totally taken away, so to speak, unless there's an emergency. But, they go to the office. There's a phone in the office, right? And then as they get older and they get into middle school and high school, then you can give them a little bit more leeway, and it gives them something to look forward to. I know when I was growing up, the idea of going from one school to another was a big deal because all of a sudden you were more grown up, okay? So it gives them something to look forward to also. and in the meantime, teaches them discipline. And I think the high school students, what the vice principals were saying about they need to learn how to structure themselves is very important, because when you get out into the real world, there's going to be times when you cannot have that phone on your person at all. You're working for someone else, and that's not going to happen. So they need to understand that, and they need to experience it. I think what's happening is very good, and I hope it continues to be very good, and I'm extremely glad that they are utilizing the library more. Reading is very important. And I'm glad you all are all for it, and you're seeing positive results.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion has been made and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.